Hello and thank you for joining me today. I am Sam Thompson and I am a sales engineer here at CrowdStrike. I'm excited to share with you the latest cyber threat intelligence gathered during 2023 by our CrowdStrike Counter Adversary Operations team. During the next half an hour, we will take an in-depth look at the cybercriminals, expose the latest cybercrime techniques, and talk about the tangible ways that you can improve your cybersecurity program to protect your data and your businesses. A couple of notes before we begin though. Throughout this presentation, you're going to hear me refer to adversaries. Now, adversaries is the name that CrowdStrike has given to the cybercriminals that we constantly hunt and track, stopping them before they strike. If you have any questions during this presentation, please use the Q&A section. We have a team on hand who are here ready to help. Okay, so jumping into this. Are you concerned about ransomware, malware, and other types of cybercrime and their potential to severely disrupt your business? Understanding cybercrime begins with recognizing that behind every cyber attack, there is a human, an adversary that you must defeat. And with the right tools and the right insights, that victory is more than possible. So with that in mind, we're going to cover key insights from the CrowdStrike 2023 Threat Hunting Report, cyber attack trends impacting small and medium-sized businesses across different industries, the steps that you can take to assess potential cyber risk to your business, and we're going to end with some predictions about cybercrime in 2024. But before we cover any of that, let's talk about the biggest threat to small and medium-sized businesses. And that is you or yourselves. Did you know that 59% of small business owners believe that their business is just too small to be targeted, and that 60% of small businesses do not have any cybersecurity policies in place? Unfortunately, small and medium-sized businesses are overwhelmingly targeted by cybercriminals. And to support that, let's look at some statistics. The threat of attack to SMB is real and is not overstated at all. In fact, small and mid-sized businesses are considered the low-hanging fruit and easy targets for e-criminals. Very small businesses are extremely vulnerable to things like malware, ransomware, brute force attacks, and social engineering attacks. And unfortunately, some of them may not survive a single incident. 70% of all cyber attacks in the US targeted small businesses. And year over year, since 2020, this attack number has increased. 60% of SMBs who are hit with cyber attacks are out of business within 6 months of that attack. Of course, this is due to the huge financial loss. Now, the type of cyber attacks that focus on SMB, in addition to the very popular ransomware attacks, is social engineering attacks. In fact, 350% more than larger businesses. Social engineering attacks are designed to manipulate, to influence, or deceive employees to carrying out actions that allow them to breach your defenses, gain control over your systems, or to steal personal details or credentials. Some examples of social engineering attacks include things like phishing emails, which are sent to users in hopes that they will open a file or click a malicious link, something which I'm sure we're all very, very familiar with. We also have smishing. Smishing is the same idea as phishing, however, these are done over SMS or text message. These got very popular during the COVID pandemics, with text pretending to be from banks or parcel deliveries. I'm sure we all got some of these. I know I absolutely did. We also have something called vishing, which again is like phishing, but this time is using voice, such as phone calls pretending to be someone they're not, or voice messages. Okay, so we can all agree now that SMB are at great risk of cyber attacks. Now let's take a look at who these attackers are. There are three categories of cyber criminals, or adversaries, that we track at CrowdStrike. The first one we have is hacktivists. Hacktivists engage in disruptive or damaging activity on behalf of some type of cause, be it political, social, or religious in nature. These individuals or groups often see themselves as virtual vigilantes, working to expose fraud, wrongdoing, or corporate greed, draw attention to human rights violations, protest censorship, or highlight other social injustices. The second adversary we have is criminal. Criminal adversaries are motivated by money. The e-crime ecosystem is an active economy full of financially motivated entities who engage in an array of criminal activities in order to generate revenue. And generate revenue they do. The last one we have in this list is state-sponsored adversaries. These are linked to cyber operations undertaken by nation states for cyber espionage, interfering with elections, theft of intellectual properties, and much, much more. Now, these adversaries are particularly advanced because they have the full support and the resources of the state behind them. They also have the protection that comes along with it. Now, when it comes to state-sponsored adversaries, we track Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea as sources of nation-state-sponsored crime. So, looking at these three adversaries, who do we think is the biggest threat to small and medium-sized businesses? Absolutely right. It is, of course, the criminal or e-crime adversary. While you may be directly or indirectly targeted by hacktivists or nation states, by far the biggest threat is the financially motivated adversaries. An example of a relatively new e-crime adversary that has been hitting the news quite recently is Scattered Spider. Now, Scattered Spider conducts targeted social engineering campaigns primarily against firms specializing in customer relationship management or CRM and telecommunications and technology companies generally. The adversary primarily uses phishing campaigns to capture authentication credentials for the likes of Okta, Microsoft Office 365, Azure, and VPNs. So, we now know that SMB are being targeted, and we know who the main threat is. But is there a particular industry that is more at risk than the others? Well, the answer to that question is a massive yes. Here are the top verticals being targeted by cybercriminals. This is the 6th year in a row that technology sector is the #1 target for cybercriminals. So, if you're listening to this and you are a technology company, well, I've got some bad news for you. You have a very large target on your back. But if you're not a technology company, don't think you're quite out of the firing line. Pretty much every vertical is being targeted. But then that begs the question, what is it that you're the target of? Well, based on CrowdStrike research of 2023, these are the top 5 types of cybercrime used when targeting small and medium-sized businesses. Coming in at #1 is malware or malicious software. Now, malware is a term used to describe a program or code that is created to cause harm. Cybercriminals develop malware for several reasons, such as to infiltrate a computer system or to destroy sensitive data. Next, we have ransomware. Now, ransomware is actually a type of malware, but because of how dangerous it can be, it deserves its own category. Ransomware encrypts a victim's data until a payment is made to the attacker. If the payment is made, the victim receives a decryption key to restore access to their files. Or at least that is the idea anyway. If the ransom payment is not made, then the malicious actor may want to publish the data on a data leak site, or just keep the file encrypted, blocking access to the files permanently. Next, we have phishing. Phishing is an email scam that impersonates a reputable person or organization with the intent to steal credentials or sensitive information. We've already seen that SMBs are heavily targeted by social engineering attacks, such as phishing. When it comes to your defense, your first line is going to be your employees. Creating and training for a strong company culture of cybersecurity awareness is key for your employees to help spot fishy emails, text messages, domains, and voice messages. Number 4 is identity-based attacks. Identity-based threats use compromised user accounts, user information, leaked or stolen passwords, data breaches, or stolen personal data to initiate access into your environments. And the last one is insider threat. An insider threat is a cybersecurity risk that comes from within an organization, usually by a current or former employee or another person who has direct access to the company network. An insider threat can leverage a position of trust to harm an organization through misuse, theft, sabotage of criminal assets. The motivation here could be a competitive one from, say, a competing organization, or it could be a disgruntled employee who feels they've been unfairly treated. Now, looking at these 5 points, there's nothing really groundbreaking here. All of these have been around for some time. So, let's talk about some of the changes we have seen in 2023. From 2022 to 2023, we have seen a marked increase in the speed of cyber attacks, the sophistication of cloud-based attacks, and the sheer volume of identity-based attacks. We'll dig into each of these in the next couple of slides. As a key metric that illustrates the challenges that security teams often face, we consistently track the eCrime breakout time. Breakout time is measured by the CrowdStrike Overwatch team. It is defined as the time it takes for an adversary to move laterally from an initially compromised host to another host within the victim environment. By responding within the breakout time window, defenders can minimize the cost and the other damages it caused by the attacker. Now, the reason for this is it's relatively straightforward to get the attacker out of just one machine. However, if that attacker gets access to the rest of the network, this is where the response becomes a lot more difficult and, of course, a lot more expensive. It's no surprise to us that once again the average breakout time declined from 84 minutes in 2022 to just 79 minutes in 2023, with the fastest record breakout time being just 7 minutes. So, while you're looking at that, the question you should be asking yourself is, does your current security program and security software enable you to detect and respond to threats in time to beat the adversary? Let's say in less than about an hour and a half. And remember, that's not an hour and a half when you're at your desk, you have your coffee in your hand and you're at your keyboard. This could be an hour and a half at 2, 3, 4 in the morning when they strike you at the worst time possible. So, now let's have a look at why adversaries are getting faster. What are some of the tactics adversaries are using? Increasingly, use of remote monitoring and management tools provide a stealthy method of maintaining access to an environment, leveraging commonly trusted system administrator tooling to blend in. Vulnerable, externally facing applications like web servers, for example, facilitate initial access in 20% of intrusions. Adversaries getting faster is driven in part by the increased sophistication in cloud and identity-based attacks. Let's take a closer look at these. Adversaries are no longer just targeting your on-premise systems. The cloud is a very attractive target as it often contains lots of sensitive information. And far too often, our cloud systems are not configured securely. Here are a few notable tactics used by adversaries in the cloud. The use of open source tooling. A good example of this is the LinPeas tool, which is a Linux privilege escalation tool. This has been seen 3 times more often. The cloud's own remote management has been used to carry out malware deployments and exfiltration. We also see cloud credentials being compromised and leveraged. These are often due to misconfigurations of the cloud systems. Now, I mentioned Linux there, and that's a good transition into this next point that I wanted to make. There is a misconception that not using Windows solves the security problem. Now, of course, we know that's not true. Linux and Macs are also active targets. This slide is interesting because you get an idea about the different operating systems targeted in different verticals. Attackers are learning which operating systems are commonly used in specific industries in order to cultivate customized attacks. For example, technology and finance are the top 2 verticals targeted on Linux and Mac OSs. Of the Mac OS intrusions, most of the financial targets are fintech companies, which span across financial and technology verticals. Now, for a real-world example on the Linux platform, we have seen a 3 times increase in adversaries replacing the pluggable authentication modules, or PAM, with a malicious module. This is typically used for the purpose of backdoor access. Now let's talk a bit around identity. Why should I care about identity threats? Identity-based attacks can allow an adversary to operate within your environment with valid credentials. In fact, 62% of intrusions leverage valid credentials in some way, either for the initial access or for lateral movement. In addition, identity-based attacks can grant adversaries privileged access to systems across your environment. We have seen a dramatic increase in Kerberoasting attacks over the last year. In fact, 583%. So, well, what is Kerberoasting? Kerberoasting is simply grabbing the Kerberoast tickets to crack and then obtain these service account credentials. Identity attacks are expanding beyond just stealing and using credentials to truly assuming the identity of your users. Access brokers. Access brokers have become a key component of the e-crime threat landscape, selling access to threat actors and facilitating criminal activities. That means an access broker will gain access to your systems, and without doing anything themselves, they're going to sell that access to the highest bidder. Many have established relationships with what we call big game hunting ransomware operators and affiliates of prolific ransomware as a service programs. So why would you buy and sell access? Well, purchasing access saves time and resource for many of the e-crime adversaries, and the demand for these is almost certain to remain high. Who are being targeted? Well, everyone. Everyone is being targeted, but the sectors attracting the highest average asking price for access are governments, financial services, and the industrial and engineering organizations. And of course, how are they sold? Well, they're sold on the dark web. There has been an increase in access broker advertisements, 140% increase on the dark web. This has led to a huge increase in profits for access brokers selling user access. An adversary known as Profit Spider is a prolific access broker. Okay, so now we know that SMB are a high risk of cyber attacks. We've looked at the adversaries behind these attacks and some of the techniques that they're likely to use. How can we better defend ourselves against these? Here are 5 steps. First, you can't stop what you can't see. I pointed out some areas where attacks are common. The endpoints with malware, emails via phishing, your cloud environments, and identity. This of course isn't a full list, but is a great start when thinking about where your gaps might be. As mentioned, identity and cloud-based attacks are on the rise. You must prioritize these areas and ensure you have the tools and policies in place to secure these. Knowing your adversary is key when building your defenses. Just by knowing the type of criminal that is likely to target you, the type of tactics they will use, and the data they're interested in will help you build your defenses accordingly. Otherwise, you're kind of just guessing. And of course, practice makes perfect. Things like regular pen tests. A pen test is where a company comes in and tries to compromise your systems and identify weaknesses before the real bad guys do. This can help you build your defenses and test your responses. Now, trust me when I say this, you do not want to wait until the real thing happens to figure out if your security tools are working. Okay, now let's look forward into the future. What does it look like for us in 2024? Well, as you probably expected, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. We predict that the large language models, such as those that drive AI chatbots, will be adopted by both the defender side and the adversaries. New vulnerabilities will see public-facing applications continue to be exploited for initial access. Access brokers will continue to lower the barrier of entry to e-crime, leveraging the identities of our users. Legitimate remote monitoring and management tools will continue to be favored tool within the e-crime intrusions. Adversaries continue to further cloud proficiency and move from attacking the endpoints to attacking the control plane. Okay, so we have now seen how SMB are at high risk of cyber attacks. We've talked about the adversaries and some of their tactics. And we've even looked at how to better protect ourselves today and moving into 2024. Hopefully you found this session valuable. There are still 2 more sessions to register for. If you haven't already, go over to events.crowdstrike.com/cybersecurity month webinars. As for next steps, if you're interested in a free trial or if you want to see more of the CrowdStrike products, including the threat intelligence, just let us know. Again, I hope you found this valuable and thank you for watching.